Hello and welcome to our Destination Rural webinar for the next generation of rural doctors. My name's Adam Colso. I'm the President of the Rural Doctors Association of Australia and I'm a rural generalist here in St George in southwestern Queensland. Before we start tonight, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we meet tonight across all of Australia and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who may be joining us tonight online. So joining me tonight, I've got a panel of 3 doctors joining us from all parts of Australia, from New South Wales, South Australia and from here in Queensland. And I'm going to ask each panel member to introduce themselves and, just tell us a little bit about who they are, why they're here and, a little bit about themselves for a couple of minutes. So Josie is in the room with me at the moment. So Josie, I'll get you to introduce yourself first.
Hi everyone, my name is Josephine Pearson and I'm one of the permanent SMOs here at St George Hospital in southwest Queensland. I have a background of being here for the last 3 years, so I've just finished my fellowship training in February this year with ACRM, and I also have an advanced diploma in obstetrics, so I help out with our on-call obstetrics roster. I've been out here for, like I said, 3 years, and before that I did 4 years of my pre-vocational training and an AST training in Toowoomba, which is a regional centre 4 hours away from us. I obviously really like St George.
Thanks, Jose. Carrie, do you want to go next?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Dr. Carrie Sims. I'm a rural generalist based in the mid-north of South Australia. I am currently working in a general practice that covers 3 different towns. So I have quite a lot of variety in my general practice from the work that we do and also the changing socioeconomic status in those towns. I have been here in Jamestown, which is the town I live in for this is my 4th year now. I have completed a dual fellowship, so both with the RACGP and I had my ACRM fellowship completed earlier this year. I undertook my aesthetics training as my advanced skill for ACRM in regional Victoria last year. And yes, I'm working here doing GP and anaesthetics. And I really loved it enough to turn up and to stick around and stay.
Excellent, thanks Carrie. And Tina?
I'm a rural journalist based in Cowra in central west New South Wales. I've been here for the last 4 years. I originally came to Cowra to undertake my general practice training, also like Carrie through RACGP and ACRM. I completed both fellowships last year and I currently work doing private general practice in the community as well as some hospital work using my advanced skills in obstetrics.
Thanks, Tina. So first question we've got tonight for our panel. We'll just answer questions as we go, and if you're online and you'd like to ask a question, just type it in the panel. But the first question really is about what influenced you to select a career in rural medicine. So Carrie, would you like to kick us off with an answer?
Sure. I always wanted to go rural, actually. I am city born and bred from Adelaide, so the capital city here in South Australia, and I went to medical school to be a rural GP. I think one of the key things that attracted me to that was community life and living in a smaller community. With that, I visit then and have found it to be true that there's quite interesting and variety of work that you can do, a lot more control that you can choose to do on a day-to-day basis. It really is a true sort of cradle to grave type of practice, and I think was a key attraction for me, as well as helping people that have more trouble accessing medical services because they are based rurally. So when I went through medical school, I did a lot of rural-based rotations, and I had the benefit of coming across a couple of really passionate rural GPs that absolutely love the work that they did and just took me under their wing. I spent with them and just sort of helped sell what the work is and what it is that you can do. So yeah, I loved it enough to check it out and definitely loved it enough that this is where I will stay for sure.
Thanks, Gary. That's excellent. Jose, do you want to tell everyone why you decided to go rural?
So a bit like Kari, I went to a medical school, James Cook University, which had a strong focus on rural and remote health because it was something that I was always interested in. I guess my interest in rural health were fostered through a number of really enjoyable and excellent placements as a medical student, where we got to have an understanding of what being a real rural doctor would be like, and enjoy some of those things like, the unique rural lifestyle that comes with it. So, that sense of community, beautiful landscapes, lots of adventures that you can have in the bush. And then I guess more in terms of clinical work, the broad scope of clinical practice and the opportunity to practice procedural medicine was a really big something that I really liked the idea of. I guess the dynamic nature of day-to-day work as a rural generalist, where you can be in the GP in the morning, deliver a baby in the afternoon, and then on call in the evening reducing a fracture, was something that was really interesting. It was something that really appealed to me. I always was drawn to the working within a small and close-knit team in a rural setting. And I guess then for me too, which is really important, is that ability to be able to work across multiple platforms of primary care, so GP, hospital, remote clinics, and the continuity of care that we are in the position to be able to provide our patients. And I guess the other thing too, I've got a few reasons why I liked rural and why I wanted to come rural. And the other thing is those special relationships that you can, and close relationships you can develop with your patients and their family within the community when you're working in a smaller place.
Come on, it was really the opportunity to work with a great boss that you met during part of your rural generalist training. You don't have to be modest here. There's only the whole nation watching. Thanks, Jose.
Good bosses play into it as well.
Tina, do you want to talk to us about why you chose to go rural?
Yeah, I guess coming out of high school and considering a medical career, I didn't necessarily have rural on my radar. And I guess talking to a lot of my friends then, we were all thinking about going to some of the big Sydney or other city universities. I guess I stumbled upon rural through my rural health club at the University of Wollongong. I got quite involved with a number of the activities that were available, including going on rural road trips, and I really found it a nice way to see different parts of Australia. So I really enjoyed the option to, I guess, travel and explore that potentially a rural career could offer. And I also figured that going rurally would allow me to use my career to benefit, I guess, towns and communities that have traditionally been long underserved with medical staff, and contribute, I guess, to the workforce numbers. I guess over the course of my training, I've really enjoyed it, and through the medical student placements, I realised that, I can survive and live and thrive in a rural environment. And since then, my, I guess, passion for doing rural work is increasing the definite difference you can make in the communities, the close-knit teams that the other girls have mentioned, as well as the fact that it is a very portable, diverse and always challenging career that I think I will never have to have a midlife crisis, because I always have something different that I can evolve my career to, and I can certainly use it to travel and see different parts of this beautiful country.
Excellent. Thanks very much. So you've all done a significant portion of your training in rural. What were some of the benefits of training in a rural area, you think, Jose?
I can think of three main ones. I guess number one, the exposure to a wide range of clinical presentations and procedures. So obviously as ACRM trainees, we need to be able to do everything to a certain degree, and working rurally, you do have to step up and manage a lot of different presentations, and you learn a lot. I guess particularly here in St George, there wasn't that competition for skills and for your supervisor's attention and those sorts of things, and because of the low numbers of trainees in our area, I got dibs on a lot of those procedures or practical skills, which was really good. And then I guess I've alluded to it before, but those close relationships that you can form with your supervisors, and that one-on-one teaching and feedback that you can get, which again can help foster your abilities as a training doctor, I think are really, really important and valuable.
Tina, what about you? What were some of the key benefits of training rurally?
Yeah, I certainly think that working in smaller teams and being a bigger fish in a smaller pond, being right at the coalface and being called upon to help contribute to decision making in smaller teams really is a great attraction, because it really helps you, I guess, mature clinically a lot quicker than I think some colleagues in the city who may have a greater hierarchy within their team before they get asked whether they want to contribute to a particular patient decision. I think working really rurally has also been really good from a work-life balance point of view. I certainly find that I love not spending time in traffic or looking for a parking spot. I certainly find the cost of living's been really good. I feel that I've been able to still achieve a lot of really great goals for myself personally while working rurally and having time to study and see some really interesting stuff.
Excellent. And what about you, Kari?
Going at the end, I have to try and not repeat things. Both Josie and Tina have outlined some pretty important things that I thought were key benefits in training rurally. Absolutely, the increased exposure that you can get when you're working in a rural area, it can seem scary that you might think you're the only one there, but you do have your smaller team, you do have your supervisors, and because you are a smaller team, you do manage some more acute cases, and you do manage some boring cases as well. And so you get a little bit more independence and you get a lot more hands-on and exposure. But I think another key that you can also have is an increased continuity of care, because, well, for example, where I am, we're a smaller area, you pick up regular patients more often, that they will come back to see you, and so you'll get to follow through something that has occurred, or if you've transferred them somewhere and they come back, you get to kind of pick up where things were left off. So I find that was quite important in my training in particular. Once you've seen a patient 1 or 2 times, or maybe 3 times, that they do become easier to work with, and you can target a few other things that you might miss if it's just your first meeting. I also did find, just to add in, along with the work-life balance that Tina was talking about, I have felt valued, that my contribution is valued in the community, and that is a nice benefit. It's nice to feel that the work that you're doing, if you've had a rough day or you've had a great day, the people around you do recognise that. And so I do think one of the beautiful things about rural life and rural training is you can really see the impact directly of the work that you are doing. And that, I think, is something to be celebrated and enjoyed.
Thanks, Kari. So if you're out there and you're listening and you've got any questions, remember to put them in our question box and we can read them out to you. So one of the advantages or disadvantages of working in a rural area is, of course, being able to do on-call. So there's lots of advantages to doing on-call, and there's some disadvantages. So the question is, how did you find doing on-call as when you're doing your training? Did you get lumped with more of it? Did you get a fair share? And was there backup when you were on call? So, Tina, do you want to go first?
Yeah, certainly. I guess I've done a range of on-call in my training. When I was in PGY3, I did my advanced diploma in obstetrics, and in that role I was essentially functioning as an ONG registrar, and I would be on the on-call roster. And I was actually really well supported. My team at that time knew that I was pretty fresh, and they held me off the on-call roster for the first couple of months until I found my feet and I was more useful and I wouldn't be calling the boss about absolutely everything. And over time, I participated more evenly with my fellow registrars who were actually on the ONG training pathway. So by the end of it, we had a fairly good even split, but I was nicely, I guess, welcomed into the obstetrics team because they knew what I wanted to train for, and they helped make sure it wasn't too daunting for me. When I moved into general practice land as a GP obstetrics registrar, I was quite fortunate having 3 other GP obstetricians in town to help share the on-call load. Again, they were aware that I was a bit new and fresh to doing the on-call in a smaller centre, and so I was lucky enough to have a buddy on the roster with me each time I was on call. So I'd be on call for a week at a time, and I'd always have a designated buddy who was my contact point if I ever ran into any issues or wanted someone to be a backup if I was doing a vacuum or other tricky delivery. Over the subsequent 6 to 12 months of my training, I became more confident and happy with how I was running with my on-calls, and so now I participate in my own right on the on-call roster. So it's been really well supported in my journey, and I feel that a lot of rural communities are wanting to try and support our generation come through and stay on in these towns, and I've been lucky that my community's been really supportive of that. A range of the bosses participate in the roster. Those of us registrars who have procedural skills participate in the roster, and there's always someone you can call. And lucky, I've always had generally another GP obstetrician in town whenever I've needed one as backup.
Thanks, Tina. Carrie, how was your on-call?
Yeah, look, similar to Tina, mine has always been really well supported. So I did 2 years of my GP registrar training in the town I now work in as a fellow. Before I did my hospital anaesthetics training. So while I was here as a registrar, and even now, it's very well supported. The benefit, in a sense, of having to cover more than one town is there is more than one person on call. And we have an obstetric on-call roster as well. That does mean that there is always the GP obstetrician that's on. So anytime I've ever needed a hand, someone's always been willing to turn up and help, be it answer a question, come in and help me because there's too many patients, or if I've got too tired or something like that. So we all participate equally in the on-call roster, our registrars and our GP fellows, or sort of more senior GPs where I am now. And the registrars always, if they're struggling or something, or they're feeling a bit overwhelmed, there's always someone there to help out. And this is that beauty that we mentioned about the smaller teams is when you have had a day, or you have been a bit tired, or you've got something else going on in your life, somebody else just is always sort of there, and we all help one another out. So that's happened for me. That's happened for my colleagues when someone's got unwell. Someone's just picked up, put their hand up and go, look, I'll cover your on-call tonight with no major issues. And certainly when I did my anaesthetics training back in the hospital, same for Tina. Initially, I was held off an on-call roster while I increased my skills and confidence. And then when I was doing on-call, it was always with a fellow, a consultant supervisor that was either on-site initially, or as I developed further confidence, was off-site, but would come in at the drop of a hat if I asked them to. So certainly my experience and my friends that have trained in rural GP as well, we've never been lumped with the on-call. We've all sort of evenly participated in rosters and always with the support of supervisors or another GP that is around in your town or close by if you need. So I've never once felt alone. And something exciting going on, people feel a bit sad if they don't get included to come and help play, as they say. So yeah, it's been good.
Yeah, Joyce, you missed out on a bit of playing the other day when we had a big multi-trauma. Tell us all about, tell us about your on-call load, do you think, during your training?
So during the last 2 years of my provisional fellow training here, to the GP component of my training, similarly to the other girls, we all share the on-call evenly amongst us. I was one of 4 when I first moved out here, so we averaged about 2 on 3 on call, which was I can't lie, it was a fair bit of on-call. Although that seems like a lot, there were a number of positives that came with that. So again, what I was saying before, you've kind of forced, but in a gentle way, to manage lots of different case presentations, and it certainly built my confidence, my ability to with decision making, and also helped my knowledge and skills and my ability to pass exams, because we all know that there's that large practical component to our exams, and if you do it all day every day, it comes across, I think, in exams. So that was really helpful. I always had supportive bosses. I certainly remember there was a time or two where you'd been up all night on your 3-day day stretch of on call and flying someone out in preterm labour, and Adam would call you the next morning and say, how are you going, you red eyes, and a bit tired, and he said, I'll hold the phone for you for a few hours so that you could get some sleep and get back into it again, which was always really really appreciated. I guess in terms of my my PHO year in obstetrics, I probably wasn't as lucky as you guys. In our hospital, we were thrown straight into it. I remember day one being on call and not being able to do a vaginal examination, and being very new to managing labour. I was on call, and so it was a bit of a steep learning curve. But certainly in that 12-month period, you do have to bridge a big gap of knowledge and ability. So although it was tricky and difficult at the start, by the end I was, well and truly comfortable, and more comfortable in the idea of coming out to a rural town and working relatively unsupervised, but, with clinicians like Adam and my other colleagues who are very senior and there to help out if need be.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone. We've got some questions coming through. And again, if you've got a question, click on the little blue hand, ask a question icon there, and you'll be able to, ask a question. So Raj has asked a question fairly specific to advanced training. What are the prospects of subspecialising in general surgery in South Australia? He's sort of asked, as far as I'm aware, it's still currently only available in Queensland and New South Wales. I'll answer my version of that before I throw to Kerry in South Australia. The hope is that with the rollout of the National Rural Generalist Program, there will be advanced skills in obstetrics, anaesthetics, emergency. Surgery is an advanced skill, and it will be rolled out under the National Rural Generalist Program. There will be training spots in each state, including South Australia, and we really do hope to get a lot more training spots up and going in South Australia soon. Training in surgery as an advanced skill has been a little bit troublesome, even in Queensland, where the Queensland Rural Generalist Program has been running for some time, just because it takes sort of 2 years to do it. And if you don't really hook in and get your scopes done, you really struggle with getting it completed. People end up finishing their 2 years and they're still trying to chase the number of scopes. They can still do a hernia, they can do an appendix, but they end up trying to complete the number of requirements for scopes under GESA when they're actually out rural. So it can be a little bit tricky, but we hope to get all those training posts up and running under the National Rural Generalist Program. Kerry, have you got any comments sort of more specific for South Australia as far as advanced skill training goes?
Certainly I know about a little bit about the advanced skill training that's offered in anaesthetics and obstetrics and maybe even palliative care, which I believe has recently maybe been looked at as an advanced skill, because I know there's positions around that you could tick that off. Regarding general surgical, what is required by ACRM, I'm not sure. We do certainly have GP surgeons. Most of them trained last century, you could say. Makes them old, but they're not. So we do have active GP surgeons that are working in South Australia. There is often a little bit of an issue with getting those sort of training positions in the larger tertiary centres. So my thought for that is I don't believe there's a specific position, but I'm not yet sure whether or not you would be able to do some surgical sort of set training or surgical RMO or registrar-based training as a, whatever it's called, where you're the one that adds on, but you're not in the training program. Anyway, that one, that you could still tick off the requirements for ACRM. Not 100% sure. It's a good question though. It's a political minefield sometimes. Trying to be a GP-based surgeon is, I think, one of the obstructions, to be honest.
Yeah, it can be really tricky to know. There's not a super well-defined skill set for GP surgeons. The college is still wrestling with what they're prepared for GPs to do. So, a lot of GP surgeons do lots of skin stuff. They do lots of flaps and more complex skin excisions. Up in Queensland, they do have a fairly defined skill set. They do hernias, they do appendices, those sorts of things. Skinless. Some are trained in laparoscopies.
Usually.
Yeah, vasectomies, carpal tunnels, a lot do endoscopy. So the emerging field of general practice endoscopy is being trailblazed a fair bit up here, and it may eventually replace GP surgeons because a lot of people needing scopes these days with the national bowel cancer screening tests, more fecal occult blood's been done, lots and lots of people doing scopes. So we'll watch this space, but Raj, we hope that we can have training positions in each state and territory, and definitely in the future you'll be seeing some training positions coming up in South Australia, that's for sure. So again, if you've got any questions, click on the little blue hand, wave to us, write a question in, and we can try and answer it in between questions. So our next question is about education and education time. So while you're in the hospital setting, your education time is pretty well quarantined. You get set educational time set aside. How does this work when you're in general practice and doing general practice training? So, Kerry, do you want to kick us off with how your education went when you were doing your GP training time?
Yeah, absolutely. So I did obviously train rurally, so based in a rural practice. So as part of taking on a registrar, the practice accepts and understands and adheres to the requirement for the training set aside. So we had that both worked for me and a registrar within weekly schedule, and then I was also able to be out of the practice, a day out of the practice for the days that I needed to attend a regional-based training or occasionally go into the capital city. Most of my training was either done within my practice or regionally. So I would travel to a nearby town, and there would be a group of about 10 or 12 of us under one medical educator, and we would meet together once a month. And so that would all be a release day from practice, all preset and pre-planned. And then if I needed to go down to Adelaide for a particular course to meet a college training requirement, then that would be accepted by practice and scheduled in. And also then there was some ability to access some funding for travel and accommodation if needed from my training provider, because I did train under the AGPT pathway, so I did go through a training provider. Certainly when I was getting closer to exams, or if I had with ACRIM, when you sit your case-based discussion, you actually have an exam and you can do that sort of over the phone. My practice was very flexible in helping me take a little bit of time off for study leave or something like that. It was just a matter of negotiating it with them in advance. But definitely I had the appropriate and required amount of time off and a little bit of ability to be a bit more flexible if I needed and if I asked. So there was quarantine time every week, without a doubt.
Thanks, Kerry. Josie, what about you? How was your teaching time?
Yeah, so I'm employed by the St George Hospital here, but we do contract GP work down at the medical centre in town. So being a hospital doctor, I guess we're lucky because we have not only our annual leave allocation, but then some PDL as well. Which is really good for being able to attend training activities. We have a weekly doctors meeting, which is a dedicated hour where we have drug reps, case presentations, a variety of different activities where we all get together in the town. So everyone, whether it be the hospital doctors or the GPs in town, come and meet. We then, following that, have an hour of formal teaching with the old docs in town, where we can, sometimes it can be more formally led, other times it can be a really good opportunity for us to bring questions and, tricky patient situations from the week where we'd like some clarification on how those of us with more experience would manage it. We also have a lot of lots and lots of informal on-the-job teaching and learning opportunities. So every day before the ward round, we'll all get together for 15 minutes at least, to check off pathology and to debrief about the night before. So certainly while I was training, and I still do now, that was a great time for me to quiz people on why they decided to do what they did overnight for patients, what their rationale was, so that I could put it in the memory bank for later and make sure that if I was faced with the same thing, I would feel more comfortable in the future, as well as then obviously talk over some of my decision making and processes and seek opportunities to work out or find out how I could have managed things better or differently in the future, and get that feedback, which I think, that opportunity to have one-on-one feedback, like I mentioned before, is really valuable for your development. And then we also had sessions. We have a GP in town who was nearing retirement, and she was more than happy to do as many sessions as I wanted with GP-focused training rather than just hospital-based stuff. So we'd meet at the medical centre regularly and go over those tricky, GP-specific issues, which was really helpful. So no complaints about my education here. I had plenty.
Awesome. And Tina, what about you?
Yeah, so based in Cara, similar to what the other girls have said, I've been a trainee through the AGPT training program, Australian General Practice Training, and as a registrar, all the practices that take registrars are, I guess, committed to provide a certain level of on-site as well as corridor teaching during your placements, and certainly that was available through generally mostly a Friday session where one of the local doctors would provide a specific teaching session, sometimes on a topic selected from the curriculum or a topic that's been raised by one of us that we felt that we needed a bit more teaching on. In terms of the hospital work and hospital supportive teaching, we have monthly peer review meetings where we between the doctors, we all share and present cases that we've learnt something from. And certainly from my procedural obstetrics point of view, we have teaching sessions where we have every 2 months, we will have a clinical meeting where one of us will present and we share learnings from the last 2 months, learnings from our statistics, learnings from recent journal articles that have come out, as well as just sharing just general refreshers on basic topics and simulation scenarios. So overall, I don't feel at all that I've missed out on any particular teaching. There's so much education available online as well through the different colleges and external providers as a rural registrar.
Excellent, thanks. So look, of course, when you're training, there's always the opportunity to get away for conferences and, of course, Rural Doctors Conference, very important. Everyone will be attending their Rural Doctors Conference in their own state.
Only if you don't have to share it with your colleague every year because you're in a small team.
Yeah, we'll just skip over that bit. And of course, everyone would want to come to RMA. Clearly there'd be competition to go to that as well.
Yeah,
but now we come to the big question, which is really more about, getting paid. So a lot of GP registrars are concerned, or potential GP registrars are concerned, that when they go into GP training, they're taking a pay cut. I want to ask each of you what your experience was of your time as a GP registrar, and now you're earning a bit more money, how that's all going, and how you feel that your pay is compared to your colleagues. So, Carrie, did you want to go first?
Sure, why not? Definitely, I do think this varies from state to state, and it will vary a lot between who you talk to. So obviously, I'm based in South Australia, and the bulk of the general practices in South Australia, both city and country, are private practices. So one of the reasons that there's a thought that there's a big pay cut between hospital-based training that you can do and GP practice is you are essentially, in South Australia at least, you are leaving the state-based health system, which does mean losing those leave, annual leave, all of your sort of retention leave requirements. And that does also mean that you, with entering the private health system, there is different ways that the contracts are set up. Certainly in South Australia, at least, and in my experience, the national standard for what a GP registrar is to be paid was adhered to and actually slightly exceeded a little bit in the that I was in. And where it was exceeded was in the percentage that I could earn above the base rate. So when I looked at what the base rate was to the base rate I was getting in the city, there was a slight drop. Once I started adding on my sort of we call them bonus payments, when they calculated what you were earning above your base, once you took into account on-call and the number of patients that you were seeing and all of those other sort of penalty payments that come through, penalty in the sense that being a rural doctor means that there is access to some incentive payments. So as they were coming through, overall on balance, I think I earned just as much, if not slightly more, working as a registrar, but definitely the way that the pay is set up is different. I did still was able to, as a registrar, access the standard annual leave, which in the private sector is 4 weeks, whereas in the public sector, the hospital sector in South Australia, it's 5 weeks, but 4 weeks. And I did still have the standard sick leave that I could access as well. So on balance, to me, there was not a pay cut, and in a sense, actually, on average, a bit of a pay rise, particularly after I'd gotten my first 6 months. And definitely, as Tina alluded to before, there is a much lower cost of living. I found as well, living and working rurally, rent is often cheaper. You're not necessarily going out for coffee every 5 seconds. You don't spend as much time in traffic because there really isn't one. My town has one set of traffic lights. So, yeah, overall, I didn't think it was a big pay cut, but you do lose some access to some payments and annual leave entitlements that have been accrued, and also some of the other, benefits, I guess, of being part of a government-based, pay setup, I guess.
Okay, thanks, Gary. Josie, how did you get paid?
I've got absolutely no complaints regarding my pay. As a provisional fellow in the hospital setting, I was in hospital setting doing my GP training. I was making at least double what I was making as what I was making when I was a regional hospital PHO in obstetrics. Obviously we were doing a lot of on-call and all the rest of which contributed to some of that, and those penalty rates and rural incentive payments, like Harry mentioned upon. There's a number of things like GP RIP payments when you calculate it all at the end of the day that does boost your income. I guess there are some of those other little benefits too, so things like some accommodation allowances as well, which some places in Queensland offer, which can be really beneficial. My experience of cost of living being cheaper in rural setting probably isn't the same. I find definitely food is more expensive out here, but when you take into account overall, I think it's, we're definitely in a very good position compared to our other colleagues in, other larger centres.
Thanks, Jose. Tina, what about you?
Yeah, so I guess I found that working rurally, I didn't really know specific numbers about what I'd be getting myself into from a financial point of view. However, I certainly also have no complaints. Moving from intern to resident to obstetric training year to general practice doing procedural activities, I've certainly found that my income has continually increased over the past 7 years every year. Like Josie alluded to, working rurally, we do have access to a number of grants that do help make things a little bit more attractive. There's the GP General Practice Rural Incentives Program, which Josie alluded to, for spending a certain number of quarters in a rural location. You start to become eligible for annual payments. So earlier this year, I was eligible for a $13,000 payment, which is a nice thing to see in the bank account, which just make things a little bit nicer working rurally to top up what you otherwise get through your earnings. And also when you're getting your indemnity insurance premiums, there's a premium support scheme where procedural general practitioners working in particular rural locations are able to access a subsidy and a cheaper premium for your indemnity insurance, which has also been a benefit. From a cost of living perspective, I certainly am spending the least I ever have as a doctor on my general life costs. I pay $87 rent a week, and I don't think you can get any better than that.
Thanks, Tina. So, right, if I had to ask you all what your biggest challenge was as part of your rural training pathway, what was it and how did you overcome it? So, Jose, you're up first for this one.
I think as a Queensland rural generalist trainee, I was extremely lucky in that we have got rural GP training pretty well down pat, I think, in Queensland. So obviously every registrar's got the everyday stress and pressures of their fellowship training, but I didn't really have any specific challenges. Occasionally I felt a little bit isolated from other registrars because I was, the only training registrar in my town at the time, but that was really easily overcome by attending the regional training providers courses, attending various conferences, and then for exams and whatnot, I just used Skype a lot with my girlfriends, and we could keep up to speed with everything that we needed to. So I guess I'm really, really blessed for being a Queensland Rural Generalist Pathway trainee.
How much of that extra study involved catch up on the Bachelor?
Oh, look, there was a portion at the beginning of each education session on Skype that we had to debrief on the week's events.
Excellent. So, Tina, what about you?
Well, I guess there's probably two challenges. One, I guess, relates to the big learning curve you do go through, going from hospital resident level to registrar level, and certainly in the frame of wanting to become a rural generalist, trying to capitalise and make the most of that 1 year training that I've got in the hospital system to upskill as much as I can so that I can feel confident and competent enough to take those skills into a smaller rural community. I certainly found that I was fortunate to have a supportive training hospital who had bosses who understood the value of having rural GP obstetricians in that catchment area, and through that I was able to, I guess, get access to enough support during my on-call and during my placements to feel ready enough by the end of the 12 months to make that transition more so into the smaller rural town population. I guess the second challenge related to my training with the colleges, the combination of ACRM and RACGP. I guess I debated it a bazillion times during my training. Why am I doing both when it would probably be much easier just to do one? During the course of my training, I guess I ended up sticking it out with both colleges. I feel that I gained something different from each college in terms of my preparation. There weren't as many ACRM registrars training the time that I was, and so I did feel a little bit isolated on that front. But during my training, I did come across some other registrars who I was able to train with and who moved to my region. So I guess there's no right or wrong answer to it. I certainly feel that coming through the other end, it's certainly challenged me and made me the type of doctor that I want to be, but it'll be an individual decision for everyone.
Thanks, Tina. Carrie,
Yeah, look, I guess one of the challenges that I had, and it's a little bit like Tina's as well, in the sense of being a dual pathway trainee, I think I might be one of the only people that has successfully managed to do that in my state thus far. I did have some challenges in accessing my advanced skill training within my state. It's one of the reasons I ended up moving to regional Victoria. I do feel that the South Australian training system is looking to improve some of those issues, which were around the time that I left, for that training. And I think one of the reasons I got a bit stuck was also where I was in my training at the change and the reduction in the number of regional training providers. So I had started under one or RTO, and then I had to move into another one because we went from having 2 training providers to 1 in South Australia. And I feel like I was stuck a little bit in some of the teething issues there. So I did find that a little bit difficult accessing what I needed. But in saying that, I did find people that were quite supportive within my training provider, but I did need to also lead the way and say, no, this is what I need, and this is because ACRM requires this, or IRC requires that. I think that Josie did touch on one of the things that you can have as a rural trainee. There is a sense of isolation that you can have, and that doesn't just mean the fact that you don't have another registrar necessarily beside you. It can be a bit hard to make new friends in a new town, and I don't think that should be ignored. That rural communities, that they value having you there, can sometimes be a bit closed off. And there's a lot of people that will talk about the importance of playing sport or getting involved in the community. And certainly I found that when I started playing tennis, which I hadn't played since high school, and I'm still not very good at, that did open some social connections. But I also think that you can be a bit isolated from other people that are training at the same level as you. And this is one of the reasons that being able to access other registrars, I think, is quite important, because if your supervisor, I have a supervisor that has been the country GP in the town I'm in for over almost 25 years. And so where she is in her level of training and knowledge and skills compared to me, there's about 20 years difference. And so it can feel a bit isolating if that's what you're often comparing yourself to. So I do think it's important to keep in mind that there is a steep learning curve, but you do need to be aware where your appropriate benchmark is. And so that does mean making some networks and working within a group of other registrars. I think that will help. I guess another little challenge that I don't want to ignore, given that it is one of the things with small communities, and I think it can be one of the things that people worry about, is this idea that your mistakes will follow you, or you will run into your patients at the supermarket, which absolutely happens. My patients are the ones that serve me at the supermarket as well. I have found that has never caused an issue in the 4 years that I've been in my small rural town. It hasn't caused me to feel uncomfortable. It hasn't caused other people to feel uncomfortable. It does mean that you come up with a very generic, hey, how's it going sort of comment to everybody. But it's manageable and it's workable. And in fact, the fact that people know you and you're not quite sure who they are is actually kind of nice. And again, I do think it's one of the benefits of a rural community, and it's just a little hurdle that you get used to, and you end up loving what is going on as well. So yeah.
Excellent, thanks, Kerry. So a few questions coming into us now on our little question board. So Jess asked that she's worried that the hospital may not need her advanced skill in the future, and that with the continuing specialisation in favour of specialist locums, will they still need her advanced skill in the future? So I wonder what the panel think of that. My answer is yes. There's actually a movement a lot of the time, depending on where you are, to moving away from specialists and using GP rural generalists, just because they can do other stuff. If you stick a specialist paediatrician in and there's no kids to see, what are they going to do? Having advanced skill means you can work in ED, you can work in general practice, and you can do that advanced skill. So I would think that advanced skills will always be very important, but also your advanced skill is portable. So if that hospital doesn't think you need that anymore, then there's a potential to move somewhere else. Like, I don't know that I'd have too much trouble getting a job anywhere in Australia with my advanced skills at the moment. So there's always the opportunity to move to another spot or move to a better spot or closer to the beach, or as Raj asked, down the track, you don't have to live rurally forever. You can move closer to the city or commute. So I'd ask the panel what they think. If anyone's got a comment. Carrie, have you got a comment there about portability?
Yeah, look, absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you, Adam. I think you should create the career that you want to have, and then find the place that matches it. And in saying that, I do recognise that some people have family and have other commitments, and that can't be ignored. That makes us who we are. So I think if you're interested in a particular skill, then I think you should develop that skill, and then, as Adam has said, take it to an area and offer it to them. I think you also need to remember that you can develop this beautiful flexibility, particularly once you're fellowed, where you can create a little subspecialty. If you set up camp in a particular town, there's not a huge number of people that are using that skill, but you then talk to other GPs and other people that you know in nearby areas, then they will refer to you. And certainly I had a supervisor who was a GP surgeon, so a lot of his referrals came from within the practice because we knew what his skills were and we were able to send to him what we needed to send to him. You can also, if you need to, you can move around with your skill. As Adam says, it's quite portable, and you do have this beautiful ownership of what you want to do, and you can make things what you want. You might base yourself somewhere and work there part-time and work in another spot part-time as well. You have this flexibility of creating a career for yourself. So I say pick what you want to do, pursue that, and then work out how it fits in once you've got it all sorted.
Tina, what do you think of that Jess's question from Jess?
Yeah, I think it's certainly an important question to consider for anyone considering a rural journalist career. Certainly when you do take on a skill, particularly more so a procedural skill, then you do need to think that it may provide some restrictions on where you can use it. However, like the girls have alluded to, it can be actually quite flexible. Certainly with my general practice obstetrics, I've maintained a good relationship with the Orange Hospital 100 k's down the road that trained me in my obstetrics, and I occasionally will go back there and do some obstetric registrar shifts there. I certainly find that there's plenty of jobs in emergency departments across the country where they're looking for people to add and contribute to their roster, and certainly anecdotally FRSCGP and FACRM qualifications are quite favourably viewed upon for the broad range skill set that we bring, and that because we are quite good in managing the wholeness of people when they present, we often are quite efficient and we know the system quite well. I think it does come down to thinking about doing what you're interested in, what you love, and you'll be good at that, and you'll find a path that will suit that. But also, if there's a particular community that you're interested in going to, if you can understand what their needs are so that you can tailor your skills to what's required, then certainly that's going to be a good match as well. I certainly don't feel that I'm restricted in my skills to staying rurally. I certainly think that if personal or other life circumstances require me to move to the city, like Adam said, I certainly feel that I'm very employable for the broad range of skills that I have, and I can certainly pull out whichever skills from that toolbox that are relevant in that particular circumstance.
Thanks, Tina. Jose, did you have any comments, last comments on that question from Jess?
No, I think I agree with both of what the girls have said. I do think that if you do have a particular community in mind that you'd like to practice in the future, it is worthwhile opening dialogue and talking to them about what that community's needs are, so that you can, tailor not only what you want to do, but also how that you can, fit the needs of that community. Though that said, in Queensland, we're seeing multiple people not following the traditional paths of taking either a procedural anaesthetic or obstetric advanced skill. A lot of people are doing the non-procedural skills, so emergency, general medicine, palliative care, mental health, and they're getting great employment opportunities throughout Queensland. So I think that the opportunities are limitless, and we are in a very unique position where we can really tailor our careers to how we want it to be and what our interests are. I think we're very lucky.
Thanks, Joe. So another question's come in from Raj, who said he'd love to live and work in a rural area, but he really, really likes the city. What opportunities are there for working part-time or, doing some of your time in the city and some of the time in the country? So, Raj, there's plenty of opportunities for locums, but the best locums, of course, had a fair bit of actual rural experience. There's the opportunity, I know quite a few locums who do 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, and in their 2 weeks off, they work in general practice in the city. And there's also the opportunity to fly in, fly out. Lots of people choose to work part-time and also work in the city some of the time, or live in the city and fly out to a rural location to do clinics, etc. So there's plenty of opportunity to work a portional, fractional position, as well as working full-time. But of course, then you miss out on the great benefits of living in rural Australia and the 2-minute commute to work and the greater variety of local wines in South Australia, etc. So there are lots of good opportunities, and definitely the rural lifestyle is one of the reasons we stay out here. So coming towards the end of our time, I'd like to just go around and ask each of our panellists for any final comments on any last bits of advice they might give to someone who was maybe considering to work in a rural area or to choose general practice as their specialty. Carrie, I'll go to you first.
I keep going first. Thanks, Adam. If you're interested, if it's something you're thinking about, then I would say do it, to be honest. But more importantly, track down somebody. Your Rural Doctors Association in every state will be able to get you in touch with someone like us, or your training provider, if there's one there that you're interested in, will be able to get you in touch with somebody that is doing the training or recently fellowed, that can have a talk to you about the question that you've got, and that's exactly what this webinar is about. But I would absolutely say, if you're thinking about it, it's a fantastic specialty that you can create into a career, and there's so many different ways that you can work as a GP and as a rural generalist, whether you remain rural or, as Tina said, if you end up moving back to the city, then that is fine as well. You can work part-time, you can specialise in an area, you can do so many different things with general practice that I absolutely think it's the best career choice I've made. So, yeah.
Thanks, Kerry. Jose, any last bits of advice?
I would like to. I agree with what Carrie's already said there. I think that, rural medicine is a fantastic career choice. I love going to work every day. Not only do I have good colleagues, but I have lovely patients, and you come home at the end of the day just feeling that what you're doing is making a big difference. We're contributing to the people in our communities' lives for the better in a positive way, and helping to, give them quality healthcare without having to travel long distances to receive it. The unique lifestyle that comes with living in the bush is unparalleled, I think. And, like the girls say, if you've got questions, ask, whoever you know that's in a rural area, ask your RTOs. But I would really encourage you that you won't be disappointed. It's a fantastic career choice, lots of flexibility and lots of fun.
Thanks, Jose. Tina?
Yeah, look, I certainly have no regrets in taking the rural pathway. I guess I've certainly found that it's been a great way to escape some of the bureaucracy and hierarchy of some of the hospital systems that you can get in the city. I certainly feel that I've been able to pave a pathway that's suited me really well. I would encourage you to go along to any conferences, hang on to the contacts of people you make who are rural doctors, and they'll go out of their way to help you get the experiences that you need to help you make your decision.
Excellent. Couldn't agree more with you all. So look, that's coming to the end of our time. I'd like to thank each of our panellists for joining us tonight. Hope you've learned something valuable from our webinar. Remember that all our webinars are recorded, and you can go to our #DestinationRural site on the RDA website. Click under the Rural Careers section and you can find all our webinars. Look for us on Facebook, Twitter, and now on Instagram, and try and follow the #DestinationRural. Plenty of advice on the RDA website under Rural Careers. Thanks everyone, thanks to our panellists, and thanks to everyone who joined us tonight to participate. Good night and thank you.